if there's ever anything to be taken seriously in this life, it is the care, the shepherding, the education of your children. And I think that's what has become more and more clear to me the longer and longer I do this, that for our family, the idea of delegating that responsibility, that role, that influence in our children's life went from one possible option to not the greatest idea. And here we are 20 some years down the road, absurd, utterly absurd that we would ever trust these eternal souls with someone who did not love them and love their God.
Today's topic is something that I get so many questions about, and that is homeschooling children with special needs. And as we know, there is a long list of special needs out there that parents deal with all the time. The reason I wanted to do this show is because probably besides single parent homeschooling, this is one of the top questions I get, because special needs education just sounds like something only experts can do. But I want to share with you this wonderful story with Dana Wilson, who is she's a veteran homeschooler and has a ton of experience with special needs. And so she's going to talk through what kind of special needs her children have and how she has educated them at home for over 20 years. So welcome to the podcast, Dana.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
So tell us about your family, and then tell us what kind of special needs that some of your children actually have.
Sure. I've been married to Dan since 1990. We are the parents of 6 children. 5 of our children were born to us biologically. We adopted a little boy from foster care. We can talk a little bit about him later. But our first baby was born in 1991, and she was born typical. I mean, I carried the pregnancy to term, pretty uneventful delivery, nice life settling into motherhood at home. But by the time she was about 4 months old, it was becoming clear to me that it didn't look like she was hitting those milestones. She wasn't doing the things you would expect even a very young infant to do. And so I spoke with our pediatrician about it. And he said, well, I see what you're seeing, but everybody's different. And let's just give it some time. Let's just give her a little time. And if we're still concerned at her 6-month checkup, then we'll, start doing some looking. And sure enough, by 6 months, she really wasn't hitting the milestones. And we went down the path of just testing different reasons why she wasn't rolling over. She wasn't reaching to grab things. She wasn't doing the things physically that you would expect a baby to do by the time they were 6 months old. And so for the next 8 or 9 months, we were sort of in the diagnosis of the month club. And that was really hard. As a first-time mom, a young mom, I was 23 at the time when she was born. So to hear, oh, well, it could be, this. Well, first of all, I thank the Lord. We didn't have the internet yet, so I couldn't go online to Dr. Google and say, well, what does this mean? And what is this like? So I was
that's so scary.
I was left with the library and talking to friends and family, but still very disconcerting, very frustrating. And so we'd go through the testing and it would come back normal. So it wasn't that thing. Well, the tests got more and more invasive, more painful, more, taking longer to get results. And so putting all of us through all of these things, she's still not making physical progress. And we still don't know why. And so we sort of exhausted all of the anatomical reasons for this situation and were referred to a pediatric neurologist. And he said, well, I'm looking through your records here and I don't find, I need her last MRI. I said, well, she hasn't yet had her first MRI, so maybe that would be something to do. And sure enough, that test showed that there was a part of her brain that was scar tissue. She'd had a stroke. There had been at some point in time blood in her brain that resulted in death of the tissue around there. And he said, well, this explains, where this is in her brain, explains what we're seeing with her physically. So it was helpful but also a little kind of scary. So now we have to find out, does she have a stroke disorder? Are we having a lot of strokes all the time? So we were able to narrow our focus, but still had to have more questions than answers. And so over the next 12 months, we found that she was not having continual strokes. So this was a single event, and we were faced with the decision of whether or not to have that scar tissue in her brain removed. The thought was that by removing that tissue, then it would grow back. We would get healthy tissue in that place. And this was the first time in our parenting journey that I really had the experience of something from outside my body, outside my brain, giving me insight, giving me wisdom, and giving me words. I'm sitting in this office with this neurologist looking at these scans, hearing these suggestions or these options for treatment. And one of them is a major brain surgery. And the way he made it sounded like it was something we needed to decide. And if we were going to do it, she needed to have it. And if we weren't going to do the brain surgery, then she was going to have to grow up with this portion of her brain unusable, scarred, and asking questions. Well, what if we do, and what if we don't, and will she walk, and how independent will she be? And the answers are all, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. And in that moment, a question came out of my mouth that I in no way would have known to ask without the supernatural wisdom of the Holy Spirit. I said, well, how long do we have to decide? And he said, oh, well, if we're going to do it, we need to do it before she's 5. Well, she was 1 at the time. And so what I heard was, we have 4 years. We have 4 years for physical therapy and occupational therapy, and just to see how she grows. At that point in time, at 1 year old, she was functionally, motorically, about like a 2-month-old baby. She couldn't sit up or hold her head up for very long. She wasn't reaching for objects in space. She was floppy. And so I thought, okay, we don't have to do this right now. We have some time. And she was a very different kid by the time she was 4. And when she was 1, it was very unclear of, we're standing at this fork in the road, which fork should we take? By the time she was 4, it was very clear that she was going to be able to do a lot more than we originally thought, and that the risks of a surgery like this did not outweigh the benefits. And so we decided not to move ahead with that course of treatment and stay with therapy and, just lots of time and love and help and hope. And it was hard. Was it harder than if we had done it? I don't think so. I think the risks of the brain surgery were tremendous. And by the time she was 4, we began to see that she was very much on her way to a very high quality of life and the ability to do most things independently. So it was much easier to make that decision. And that was how we became the parents of a child with cerebral palsy. She also has hearing impairment, not related to the stroke she had. She just also has permanent sensory neural hearing loss. But that was kind of how we got started. We've never not been a special needs family. We've never not had specialists and therapies and equipment and that sort of thing in our lives as parents. So that's how we got started.
That's quite a way to start parenthood, I tell you. And I think it taught you a lot of things that now you're able to share with others. I have more questions about that later. But my listeners will want to know, how did you start this journey of a special needs parenting and also decide, well, we're going to homeschool too? Tell us a little bit about that.
So when Hannah got to be school age, we lived in a small town in southwest Oklahoma, and we actually lived right across the gravel driveway from a very sweet little Christian school that was founded and run by my husband's family. It's where he went to school. It's where his sister and his cousins went to school. And it was certainly expected that that's where our children would go to school. And so when Hannah was 4.5, we sent her across the road with her little gait trainer with her braces on to play with the other kids and for pre-K, because it was what we did. And it was wonderful. She had a wonderful year. By the end of that year, it was clear she wasn't quite ready for kindergarten in a more rigorous private school setting. And so we started to look around, and we lived outside the city limits, so our small town school is Cache Public Schools in southwest Oklahoma. Wonderful kindergarten teacher there who had a delightful classroom, was very welcoming of Hannah, able to accommodate her physical limitations. And so she had a glorious kindergarten year. Well, then it's time for first grade. And in the Christian school is very, oh gosh, there's a word for it. just rigorous. It was pretty
Mm.
academically rigorous from the early grades, and that was what sort of the school's reputation, that's what parents expected. And Hannah wasn't quite holding a pencil yet, and she also wasn't able to do a full day of school yet. A half day of school would wear her out to the point where she needed a 2 to 3 hour nap every school day. She was
Mhm.
exhausted. She loved it, but she was very tired. So a full day of school was too much. In our local public school, they had the regular first grade classroom, which was, you know, desks in a row, a lot of seat work, and that was very difficult for Hannah to manage herself in an upright position for an extended period of time. And again, she's not yet quite managing a pencil and things like that, and they were expected to do a lot of pencil and paper work by then. They also had special education. The children that were served in that small school in the special ed program, most of them had intellectual disabilities. Hannah does not have an intellectual disability. Hannah has an average IQ with physical disability. And while she was welcome in that space, it was not going to meet her needs academically. And then the traditional classroom could not accommodate her needs physically. And so I would often say, especially back then, that we kind of ended up homeschooling. I didn't have the confidence to say, you know, we've examined all our options and we've chosen this as but I knew that I could either try to advocate and change things and create this environment, these accommodations for my child within this system, and hope that some of my efforts and creativity and energy would trickle down to her. Or
Mhm.
I could keep her at home. And all of my efforts and creativity and energy would go into helping her thrive. And so the choice was it was easy, but it was complicated. And so at the end of kindergarten, I thought, okay, well, we're gonna give this homeschool thing a try for first grade. And I said to myself, I said to my husband, you know, I did pass first grade the first time through. So I think I can figure this out. Went to our little library, checked out the little handful of books they had on home-based education and read them over the summer. I started Hannah's homeschool program in June because I thought if this is going to go down in flames, I want to know before August so we can figure out something else to do. But by the time we got to August, we were thriving. You know, it was exciting and fun. She loved it. I had a toddler at the time, and it was so much easier managing my household when I didn't have to get somebody up and dressed and out the door to school every day. We still left the house for therapies and other things, but I was surprised at how much more peaceful and productive our home days were. And read some of the great early homeschooling books. Remember, this would have been about 1996 or so,
Okay.
about 1996. And so I read Better Late Than Early by Raymond and Dorothy Moore.
Mhm.
I thought, oh my goodness, so we have time. I read Homegrown Learners, which I think was also by the
Mhm.
Moores, and began to see that education and life are not two separate things. They're the same thing. And so when we're living, we're learning. When we're learning, we're living. And those two sort of became the foundational, the pillars, right,
Yeah.
of our homeschool. And then I began to learn about the different ways to homeschool and you know, methods and philosophies and that sort of thing. And I think, again, living in the age before the internet was such a gift to our family
Mhm.
because I educated myself with books on
Mhm.
education and child development and just family life and really learning how to construct a life that was not what I grew up with. I grew up with a single mom in the 70s. And so I was a
Mhm.
latchkey kid. There was nothing about the home life I was trying to create for myself and my husband and our girls that was anything like the way I grew up. And so while they played a lot, I leaned into those great books and I eventually made my way to books like The Well-Trained Mind and A Thomas Jefferson Education and some of those that helped me to move into this world of home education with peace, but also with confidence. And so one of the things I talk with parents about a lot is as you're making this idea shift, this paradigm change, take the time and invest in your own education. Figure out your why. Why are we doing this? Because once you have a solid why, then what to do and how to do it, those questions really begin to answer themselves, and we can avoid a lot of confusion, a lot of burnout. You can save a lot of money by
Mhm.
putting down a good foundation and having pillars that will hold up this lifestyle of home-based education, whatever kind of learners you might have in your home.
I definitely agree with knowing your why and defining it, writing it down, and then keeping it in a place where you can go back and look at it. Because, like you said, when you tend to feel burnout, it's probably just a method that you need to change and not your whole life, you know. And so a lot of people get burned out maybe because they've given themselves very high expectations in their curriculum or maybe their schedule. And it's not homeschooling itself that's burning them out, probably how they've chosen to approach homeschooling. But if you go back to why, you know, whether it's my child has some special needs or they were bullied or whatever that reason is, remembering that will help you say, okay, so I've got a really important reason to keep homeschooling. So let's see what I can change to make it work for us. And
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
you said, it's family life and schoolwork, you know, and you can mix those up and blend them in whatever way you need to. And in your case, just shows us just how, you know, how far you can go with a child with cerebral palsy. You still said, I can do this. I like that because, like you said, it wasn't looking at all the choices and picking one, you know, off of a list. It was sort of being forced into it and realizing, I think I could do a good job or even a better job with my child than any government system can. And that's not to say that there are not wonderful special ed teachers out there that care.
Yeah.
There are, but there's no one that cares for your child more than you do, and no one's going to take the time that you will take.
Right. One of the things I've realized is that those years of trying to identify and meet Hannah's special needs really laid the groundwork for taking the reins of her education as well. Because what becomes clear very early for families whose children have complex medical lives is that our lives are full of experts. We have all the ists, right? We have you know, the pulmonologist and the gastroenterologist and the ophthalmologist, all the ists for all of your
Yeah.
isms, right? And they are specialists in what they know. None of them was a specialist in Hannah, in my daughter, and I was the expert on Hannah. And um, so walking through that time, I began to realize these people have their place, have a role to play. And some of them for seasons were responsible for keeping her alive. And I'll never not be grateful for that. But I
Hmm.
will also never give away my spot at the head of the line as the expert on my child. And so
Yeah.
taking that history, those experiences into education, into what we're doing at home and why we're doing it at home, I think gave me a little bit of moxie when it came to it. And I thought, um, we may make some false starts. We may not be able to, have everything figured out perfectly on this first pass through, but I will figure it out because I'll never stop trying. No
Hmm.
one, none of the ists love her and are as committed to her lifelong good as I am. And that puts me both in the privileged position of making those choices, but also with the ultimate responsibility for making them well as I can. Besides reading all I could get my hands on, I exhausted our little public library, so I came up and used my mom's library card in Oklahoma City and went to her library that summer. The other thing I did was attended a homeschool conference in person
Mm.
and heard from people who were further down the path that that not only was it possible, but that it could be absolutely glorious, and that it did not have to be a schoolroom and a desk and textbooks and tests, especially not in the first grade, but that it could be a simple, beautiful life of learning. It was, there are no there's no happenstance, right? It was orchestrated. The Lord provided for me in that moment that I got to hear from some of the heaviest hitters in the homeschool world at that point in time. I wouldn't have known to go search these people out. I found out that there was, at the time, I think it was called a book fair. It wasn't even a conference or a convention
Yes.
yet. It was a book fair, and it was all the way in Oklahoma City, so it felt kind of fancy to go to a book fair. And I enjoyed looking at curriculum. I loved speaking with mostly the authors of
Hmm.
these different homeschool resources were right there in those booths, but then sitting in those workshop sessions and hearing for the first time, not just what homeschooling was, but what does that look like with skin on, just walking around.
Yeah.
And I'll always be grateful for that. And I'll always advocate for parents who are thinking about beginning this journey to become educated themselves. Get those books, check them out at the library, do the half price books, whatever it takes to build your own core knowledge. And then get out and listen to and make connections with people who are farther down the path and be encouraged, be vitalized by what they have to share. It's hard won and it's valuable, and allow them to speak into that in a way that's going to give you the peace and the confidence to do it long term.
I agree. And that's exactly why I wanted you to come on and talk to my audience, because you do have that experience. How old is Hannah now?
Hannah is 33. She'll be 34 next month.
Okay, so you know what you're talking about. You've done the whole parenting thing with Hannah. She's an adult. And can you tell us a little bit about what she does now?
So Hannah still lives at home with us because she does not drive. That really is the thing that keeps her close. She works she can't work full time. She
Mhm.
poops out after about 5 or 6 hours, and so she has a part-time job. Other than room and board and insurance, we do still have her on our insurance. So she does
Mhm.
not earn enough to cover her own insurance. That's another whole part, not necessarily the homeschooling, but just parenting children
Mhm.
with special needs. It doesn't end when they're 18 or 22. But she went to culinary school. She finished high school at 20 and went enrolled in our local VOTEC in their culinary program and
Wow.
loved it. And she did great. They were able to accommodate her limitations and she did wonderfully. She does not have the stamina or the speed to work in that line of work. And
Mhm.
so realizing that, came back out of that, regrouped a little bit at home and decided that she wanted to get a degree in library science. And so she has been working now she goes at Hannah speed. So this
Mhm.
degree has probably taken her 6.5 years to get. We're almost done. She will graduate this May with her
Wow.
with her library science degree, mostly done online. She started, and then, of course, the world shut down with the
Yep.
pandemic, and a lot of those classes went online. And honestly, a lot of them never came back in person. She's done
Mhm.
very little in person, has continued to work part time, and would really love like a school librarian kind of a job. She's very qualified for that. And that would suit her energy needs, being, relatively part-time in nature, that sort of thing. So still living at home, but just loving life and working a job that she enjoys, finishing a degree that she's excited about. And in a lot of ways, I would say she's probably about 10 years, I hate the word behind. She
Mhm.
is at now at almost 34, where a typical person might be at, say, 22 to 24. But there's not a prize for finishing first. What she's learned is that you just keep going. You stay with it. You work hard at things
Mhm.
that are difficult over the long haul to achieve the things that you want in life. And so that's where we are.
That's so encouraging to hear. I love that you've given us from the very beginning all
Yeah.
the way to adulthood. She's working on she's already gotten one certification. Now she's going for a degree, and I'm kind of jealous that she's doing library science. I wish I had done that. And if I was going to go back to school, that's probably what I would do. But it doesn't matter. Like you said, when the finish line is hit, you have prepared her for an actual adult life and a career, and she's getting a college education, and all because you advocated for her from birth. And then you had the boldness and the confidence, or like you said, the moxie to go, you know what? I can figure this out. It's not going to be easy, but I can. And I just assume, having been a mom myself, that in the very beginning, there were probably a lot of tears and a lot of what ifs. and
Sure.
fear when she was a baby, and you were getting told so many scary things and so many things that were just so uncertain. But now you not only do you get to look back at her life and say, God is so good, but you get to tell other people, look, I started where you are right now. A lot of parents might be in that
Yeah.
position, but you've got 33 years of experience to say, yeah, that was really hard. It was really scary. But now she's an adult, obtaining a degree. She's working in a field that she loves. It's all going to be okay. And that's really the message that I want this podcast to send is it's going to be okay. You can do it. You
Yeah.
will get to that finish line one way or another. And there's not just one right way, is there?
Right. There's not just one right way,
It's a
one
tongue twister.
right way, tongue twister. Um, but I will say that there is a wrong way. And the wrong way is to throw your hands up and say, I can't.
Mm,
Or there were tears. There were times when I thought, what I have to offer to this job is so inadequate to the size of the task. Um, Anything would be better for her than what I'm able to offer. I think it is God's provision that we didn't have many choices. I didn't have a lot of choices. And so that brought me back to we have to figure this out. But I had those moments, and it's tough because I can look back now and I can talk to Hannah now about those moments when I knew I was struggling with with homeschooling, with family life, with parenting, with home management. But that's not what my kids remember of those years. That's not their recollection. I have a particular memory of one of those just moments where I was kind of falling to pieces at the kitchen table, like you do. And everybody was on a break. I had just sent them outside just to get, the fresh air and sunshine, vitamin D therapy. And the idea was, 10 or 15 minutes while I switch the wash, and then we're back, back to lessons, back to whatever's going on. And I couldn't even tell you what all fed into my moment. But I was sitting at the kitchen table, and I felt like I can't go on. Can't do this. It's too hard. It's too much. No matter how hard I try, the hurrier I go, the behinder I get kind of feeling. And they were so blissfully oblivious outside, playing together, doing their own thing, and feeling like they were really getting one over on old mom by extending this recess, right? And in those moments, the Lord just met me, and I looked up out of my little moment of self-doubt, of exhaustion. Those things are real, and just out the window to those children, to the backyard with no grass, because we could either grow children or grass, but not both, to see that whatever else might be happening, those kids were happy and healthy and connected to each other. We had a roof over our heads, food in the pantry, and, maybe those math lessons don't get all the way done today. Maybe we don't finish diagramming those sentences today. Those things will all be there. My job in that moment was to do the next right thing in faith with excellence and to the glory of God. And that next right thing turned out to just be lunch. So I just made them a nice lunch, and then I called them in and we ate lunch. And after that, it was sort of a reset for my attitude for that day. And I began to look for and appreciate those moments where, I got a little bit more of a bird's eye view of, maybe this day has gone off the rails a little bit, or maybe this week has been wonky, or maybe, all kinds of things. But God is sovereign. He's given me this job. This job is therefore a gift, as Elizabeth Elliot would say, and therefore I will do it with joy.
Amen. Well, I want to ask a little bit of a logistical question before I move on to some other things. And that is, can you just give us a brief look at some accommodations that you made in education for Hannah? Since, like you said, she is intellectually on her level and always was, but you had to deal with some physical limitations. So just, I know there were probably many things over many years that you did, but can you give us a couple of examples of ways that you made accommodations as a homeschool mom for her?
So it usually had to do with accommodating her physical limitations, either manual dexterity, fine motor skills, and then just her energy because of the part of her brain that was destroyed when she had a stroke. The messages going from her brain to her hands and feet, to her arms and legs. It's like moving through molasses. So where you or I might be able to, what's that noise? Or, oh, I'm going to catch this falling object. She's a 10-minute girl in a 10-second world. So giving her extra time for everything and not making her feel less than or ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
We had some experiences outside our home with people who maybe didn't quite understand her need for time. And she would come home feeling like, I'm not fast enough. I'm not, you're fast enough. You're as fast as you need to be. So a lot of those accommodations had to do with working with the way her body worked best. And so when it came to things like, math, right? We didn't start with workbooks and pencil and paper. We started with manipulatives. And
Mm-hmm.
she did manipulative based math with me scribing for her for years. If she could build it, and I'll tell you this too, you can use manipulatives up through calculus. If you can't
Yes.
build it, then you probably don't understand it. And so we would discuss the problem she could read. So she would read the problem and build the answer, and then I would record her answer. Or not. I mean, when she was little, I would just say, "Oh, that's great," or "not quite." We
Yeah.
weren't too worried about keeping having a daily record of what we were doing. Her early math was Math UC because it is a manipulative based math
Mm-hmm.
program. I got to meet Steve DeMille on that in that first book fair I went to and met his son Johnny, who's about 10 years older than Hannah and has Down syndrome. And it was the reason that he wrote that curriculum. And it was a fantastic start to math for us. I love math. I love it so much. I was going to teach math to a kid who couldn't hold a pencil. Well, Mr. Demi had that figured out and
Uh,
had a wonderful program that worked very well for our family.
we use
Uh,
Matthew C, and I don't like math, and I love Matthew C also. So it just tells you what a flexible curriculum it is.
it is. It is. And so he was the one who told me. I was so grateful. Steve Demi that first year for math, Betty Smith with Eagle's Wings for language arts,
Mhm.
and Konos curriculum, Jessica Hulsey.
Okay.
Those three I met at that first homeschool book fair, and I was set free from the preconceived notions I had about math, language, and then everything else. So build the math problems. If she
Mm-hmm.
understands it, then move on. Perfect. The Alphabet Island approach to phonics was very multisensory, hands-on, and didn't require a lot of paper and pencil work. And Betty told me exactly what a school day should look like and how long I should spend at the table with my sweet girl. And it was a lot less time than I originally thought. She said,
Yeah.
45 minutes maybe in the morning, another 30 to 45 minutes reading in the afternoon, and then just let her play. And so that's really set me free from thinking she needed to fill out workbook after workbook for spelling and writing paragraphs. And
Mm-hmm.
then talking with Jessica Hulsey about her Konos curriculum and the unit study approach that would bring
Mm-hmm.
in the history, the geography, the science, the Bible, all those things into things we could actually do together.
Yeah.
I grew up in the public school system. I sat and read everything. I didn't do very much. And
Mm-hmm.
I've spent 27 years doing with my kids. And I couldn't be more grateful for the start that we got and for those three people in particular in person encouraging me um, in the ways to set up our homeschool to serve our family. I'll never forget something that Jessica Hulsey said to me at that conference. And she said, "Don't you ever bring anything into your home that doesn't serve the vision you already have. You don't change your vision to fit a curriculum. You change your curriculum till it fits your vision." And it was huge. It was enormous for me because I was a system girl. I'd grown up in system and I like systems. Systems are great. If you work the system, then you get what you're supposed to get, right? But that's not true in parenting. It's not true in people. And so that has stuck with me all these years. Our vision has evolved, it has changed, it has refined over the years and our kids. And as a foster family, we also have a son who has a different type of disabilities. And so we've had to make accommodations. We've had to revisit that why, that vision, that family purpose and mission, but only for the purpose of making it more appropriate, more biblical, more personalized, not ever to fit some curriculum or system of education that has no clue who me or my kids are. So that was just a giant gold chunk of wisdom.
Yeah.
Don't ever for a minute bend your vision to fit a curriculum. You find curriculum that helps you accomplish your vision.
Love that. And I haven't said those exact words, but one of my major things that I try to share in writing or even in the podcast is choose your curriculum wisely. Don't settle, don't skimp, don't, I know sometimes we need something cheap and affordable, so go find the used version of the good stuff, but
Yeah,
do not compromise on curriculum because the whole purpose of homeschooling is to have a different education and
yeah,
different is good. So let's be
different
different
is good.
and individual. So, as you just alluded to, you had more kids than just Hannah. And
That's true.
so, what you said, 6 kids,
Yeah.
and you have fostered many more over the years, including some foster children with special needs. So, you didn't just have one special needs child and everything was, focused on Hannah. So, tell us a little bit about the big
Uh,
picture.
yeah, the cast of characters is Hannah. She was born in 1991. She has cerebral palsy and is hearing impaired. Her sister Olivia was born in 1996 as we were beginning our homeschool journey. Is typically developing, no, special needs in particular. Olivia discovered at a very young age that she had an exceptional musical gift, which was its own kind of special need,
Yeah.
and so began playing musical instruments very young, started harp lessons at the age of 8, which is very young for an instrument like that, and then went on to conservatory. She's a music teacher now. She's a married
Oh.
lady. She's a mama, 28 years old. And so that's our second born is Olivia. Then in 1999, we had Seth, our first son, our third child. Again, an uneventful pregnancy and an uneventful birth, and then realized shortly after that he was having trouble going poop. He was having trouble filling those diapers. And so what's going on with
Mm.
that? So that sort of led us down didn't take as long, which was nice, but he has a condition called Hirschsprung syndrome, which affects the ganglion cells in the body, and that's a part of what makes it possible to evacuate your bowels when you need to go. So at a very young age, he had a lot of digestion problems and absorption problems. So growth was an issue, getting adequate calories in was an issue. He became like a full-time job figuring this kid out. And I had a little pity party for myself because I thought, I've done this already. I've
Yeah.
done the medical mystery. I've done the ride the roller coaster of possible, diagnosis and treatment paths and prognoses. If I have to do it again, could I not at least do it in the same way? Does it have to also be something completely different? So
Yeah.
Seth has Hirschsprung syndrome and he has autism. And so he was nonverbal until he was nearly 5 and had a lot of the behaviors and challenges that you can think of when you think of a boy. The autism classifications have changed over the years. When Seth was diagnosed, his diagnosis was moderate to severe classic childhood autism. He would now be probably considered at that stage in his life an autism level 3. And it's a lot. It's a lot all the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
That with his digestion and absorption issues, was so much. And Seth is 25 now and works full time as a mechanic, lives on his own. He's still quirky as all get out. So that makes it a little hard to talk with him. Sometimes we've discovered that it's easier for him to text than to have a face-to-face conversation. But he graduated from our homeschool in 2019, went to Votech for automotive repair technology, and is working in that field and loves it. So that was a whole other educational path, someone
Yeah.
who not only learns differently, did have more of an IQ struggle, but also with all of the sensory and processing issues that come with a brain with autism. That
Mm.
was that was a lot.
Mm.
After Seth is Claire. Claire is 20 years old. She's a college student. She's majoring in English education. She'll be a high school English teacher. She really wants to be a wife and a mom, and she will. She's actually getting married in about 3 weeks and wanted to go to college, wanted a degree, but she really just wants to be a homeschool mom. So she's getting an education degree and plans to be a homeschool mom. And so she's our typical kiddo, typical developing kiddo with a high IQ. So my challenge with Claire was keeping her supplied with materials and challenges that were stimulating to her and helping her launch well with the package that she came in, right? Her ability.
Mhm.
And we have Jesse. Jesse is 16 years old and he has high definition dyslexia. He's mechanically inclined and is a math whiz, but that poor kid could not spell his way out of a paper bag. So we're, working on how to have those appropriate accommodations so that he can
Mhm.
achieve all the things he wants and needs to do. And working with the dyslexia, there's not a cure for it. You learn to manage it. You learn to accommodate for it. You learn to advocate for yourself as a person with dyslexia. And he's gotten very good at all of those things. And so great kid, bright future. And then our son Jacob came to us through foster care. We adopted Jacob in 2017. Jacob was born with microcephaly, lissencephaly, and thrombocytopenia. And those three together are a life-limiting combination. We knew when we adopted Jacob that he would not need a family for a long time. We didn't know would he be with us for 2 years or 5 years or 12 years. We never expected Jacob to become an adult. As it turns out, the days written down for him were 364. He died the day before his first birthday, and we loved every moment of being his family, but it was a lot of time in the hospital, a lot of specialists, homeschooling my crew with hospice in our home to help us take care of our son. And so, from year to year, our homeschool has looked like everything you can imagine. But it's been beautiful and good. There are definitely things, if I had the chance, that I would probably do differently. I would be more patient. I would be more a lot of things, right? But I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't take anything for those experiences, the people that we have loved and taken care of and lost. So I've never not been a special needs mom. I've never not been a special needs homeschooler. But I've also never felt alone. My husband is very supportive of our homeschooling, of us as a family, of our children, of the foster care. The Lord has been so kind and surrounded me with community that has made the difference in my ability to continue down these hard paths. Is having friends who kind of get it. It's worth doing the work to become and remain engaged with people who get it. So find that. Find your tribe, find your people, do that work. And I've never not known God's providence, his goodness, his absolute faithfulness to meet the needs we have. His divine power has already provided for everything we need through the knowledge of the one who called us. And so with that as the starting point, there really isn't anything we can't do with or for the children appointed to our care, whether by birth, through adoption, through foster care, through the more casual connections that we have with people. We're put here for that purpose, and we are the most like our Creator, I think, when we are at work in other people's lives.
I just am listening to all of that you're sharing, and I think it's very important for people to understand you can go into this with a plan, but you need to understand that it's you should pencil it in.
Yeah,
Like you said, every year looked very different, and it has to with different special needs, plus
yes,
foster children come because they come and go, and it's not a long-term thing, and they will definitely change the way your house looks and your
right.
schedule. And so I think it's very important to people to understand you can make a plan and have something to shoot for, but always be flexible and remember that God's working in you just as much as he's working in your children, and definitely let him do that work. Like I said earlier, I know that you can look back now and thank God for what he's done.
Of
But
course.
and that's how I've been too. I can look back on my life and think it was all worth it. The struggle was worth it because of what God did in me. But when you're in it, it doesn't feel like something that you want to thank God for at the time, but let him do the work in you and ask him to work through you for your children. It is worth it. It's definitely worth it. It's easy to look back on and see that, but if we don't let him work in us, we're not going to have much to look back on and thank him for.
Right. It's the be still, the cease striving, right? And
Hmm.
know that I am God. Because I'll tell you, I've prayed many days, Lord, you made these kids. I need you to do something with them because I am out. I am out.
Yeah.
But remembering that they are eternal souls who bear the image of the one who alone does all things well. That is at the same time a huge relief. They don't bear my image. It's a huge responsibility. I am taking care of these eternal image bearers of the one true God. If there's ever anything to be taken seriously in this life, it is the care, the shepherding, the education of your children. And I think that's what has become more and more clear to me the longer and longer I do this, that for our family, the idea of delegating that responsibility, that role, that influence in our children's life went from one possible option to not the greatest idea. And here we are 20 some years down the road, absurd, utterly absurd that we would ever trust these eternal souls with someone who did not love them and love their God. Absolutely absurd.
So speaking of that farming out, I just want to ask, have you ever utilized the public school services for any of your special needs children
We
along?
actually did. When we decided that Hannah would stay home for first grade, because remember that was my commitment, right? First grade. I knew I
Mhm.
could do that because I already done it once. Back at that point in time, unenrolled students were eligible for services through the public school. And so I was teaching Hannah at home. I had Olivia. She was a little kid then, and we were going to school 2 mornings a week, I think, for OT and PT. We had occupational and physical therapy back to back 2 mornings a week, and it was fine. It was exactly what it needed to be. Didn't really ever think there'd be anything different. And in 1 year, I got pregnant with Seth. We moved to Oklahoma City, and so I contacted the public school in the district where we moved to say, hi, we homeschool, we're new to the district, and my daughter has cerebral palsy and we need therapy. That was at the end of a school year. It was in March. And so we, went to do the evaluation. She already had her IEP from our former school and met this wonderful therapist. She was our occupational therapist. We also had a physical therapist there at the school and finished out the school year. And the occupational therapist offered to continue to see Hannah through the summer. She saw that Hannah was really sort of on the cusp of making some real gains OT wise, which is fine motor, which a lot of your self care is fine motor. Fasteners, buttons, and zippers, and hygiene, all those things are fine motor skills. And so she said, I can bill your insurance. Your insurance will pay for occupational therapy. We need a prescription from your doctor. She walked me through that whole process. Well, during that summer, the state of Oklahoma interpreted the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act as it applied to school students, such that individual districts were then allowed to determine whether or not they would serve non-enrolled students. We lived in the Oklahoma City Public School District at the time, and pretty much across the board in the state of Oklahoma, it would have been the 1999-2000 school year. It was determined that if your student was not enrolled, they were not going to be served. They were no
Wow.
longer going to serve non-enrolled students. And I did have a panic moment. Here I was with this kiddo with cerebral palsy who still had so many things we needed help with. And it felt like someone pulled the rug out from under us.
Yeah.
And God in his goodness provided us with that occupational therapist who had continued her services with us through the summer. Also, a sweet Christian lady who believed that God's providence was always, you know, in our good, right? That God was always providing for our good. Walked me through it and said, well, here's what this means, and here's what you need to do. You'll have private therapy. I would love to continue to see Hannah as her private therapist. I have a friend who is a physical therapist. I think she'd be a great fit for Hannah. Here's how insurance works. Here's how we bill them. And here's a little secret that I don't think you know, and that is your school-based services are limited to classroom functional goals. So when Hannah's at school, we can't work on cooking or ponytails or bathing goals. We can't do that. She doesn't need to do those things in a classroom. So those can't be goals for her in her school-based therapies. Outside of school-based therapies, it's whole person functionality. And I realized then that that was a gift. It was a gift from the Lord, because I don't think I would have looked outside of those school-based services if they hadn't been taken away from us. I've since learned that even for our students with special needs who are in school, those families really must be looking outside those school-based services so that their children can meet the non-classroom functional goals. And so that was, we did use the public school services while they were available to us. But once they weren't, we were actually not limited, but freed to employ the therapists, not the ones that were identified and provided to us with the school, but the ones who were a good fit for Hannah and her needs and our goals and our schedule and our, and all those sorts of things. We were freed up. And so we did use those school-based services when they were available. Now, when Seth was little, he also, first of all, as a little kid with autism, he was a double handful on a daily basis. He qualified for special education. We lived in Edmond at the time, so we used Edmond Public Schools, and he went to their special ed preschool for a year because it was what I could think of to do to be able to accomplish our school day things with my older two girls. And so he did that when he was 3, and he would have qualified, he qualified for special education, but once it was time for school with him, we knew that we were going to do school at home. Between the ages of 3 and 4, we found a therapy provider in Wichita, Kansas, who was able to take us from just this very difficult to manage, impulsive, autistic boy to someone who was, well, he could talk. We, through our time back and forth to Wichita, Kansas, homeschooling my girls, both places, Seth learned to talk, learned to relate, learned to advocate for himself, and became somebody that we could reason with. And so that was also another huge benefit of homeschooling for us, was it freed us up to spend a half of every week in Wichita, Kansas for about 3 years, getting intensive intervention for his gross and fine motor and speech and language needs.
I think that's important because, as with anything the government provides, you're limited to what the government provides. Right. And the same goes for the school system. And I have actually asked a lot of parents of special needs children that question, and they've overwhelmingly said, we tried the public school services and we found that we needed the freedom to do what worked best for our kid, where what happens at public school has to be limited and sort of standardized even for special needs children. But it's just like anything else you do on your own outside the government, your choices are much bigger and everything's on your schedule. Obviously, it's on your budget. You do have to face that, but there's so much more freedom in doing everything, not doing it yourself, but being in charge of it yourself. Right. And I appreciate that you said that losing the service actually freed you and gave you more options.
Really did. And then the other thing is I learned, and you wish that these kiddos, we wish that any of our kids came home with their instruction manual, right? That I could watch a YouTube video on how to do this whole parenting thing. But when you have a kid who has a lot going on, a lot medically, a lot developmentally, man, it would be nice if there was some sort of a cheat sheet, a code you could put in to say, okay, what do I need to know that I don't already know? And one of them is that your health insurance provides occupational, physical, and speech therapy. So get to know your benefits and make sure you're taking advantage of those on behalf of your kiddos. So whether your kid's enrolled in school or whether they're not, figure out what your health insurance provides and take advantage of all of those benefits on behalf of your kiddo. If you are a family that is uninsured or underinsured, we have a lot of families who the fact that they have a child with special needs puts them in this financial and insurance limbo. You earn too much for a lot of state programs. You don't earn quite enough to pay for an all-inclusive insurance. Maybe you only have major medical, which is, just the big stuff, the ER visits and that sort of thing. And so you sort of fall in between. We now, in the state of Oklahoma, a family who has a child with exceptional medical needs, the child can qualify for state medical care, for Medicaid, for Oklahoma Complete Health, irrespective of the parent's income, or maybe up to a limit of the parent's income. And so there are some efforts legislatively to fill in those gaps and to hold up those families that are bearing up under a lot. And so if your kid has special needs and you're not using private services, then figure out a way to know, well, there's a better way to say that. If you have a child with exceptional medical needs and you're not currently using private services, look into whether those are available. And if they're not currently available, find a way from where you are to that availability, because there's a big chance that that's something that's out there for you. And it makes all the difference in the outcomes for our kids and their abilities to maximize all of their potential.
That's good advice. So I have one more question that just relates to homeschooling special needs children and your typical children. You said you had 5, 6, and foster children. So how did you mix them all together and educate all these different kinds of kids without losing your mind?
Well, it looked different. So the first thing I would say is prayerfully and thoughtfully establishing a routine, a rhythm to daily life, so that I know what to expect, so that they know what to expect. One of the things I think that really I learned in parenting Seth that I think applies to parenting in general is that when I have no idea what's going on and I'm flying by the seat of my pants, that's really stressful for my kids. And one of the things that happens in the family when you do go out to school is that you end up with this routine. Every morning we have to be up by 6 and breakfast by 6:30 and out the door by 7 and that sort of thing. When we're at home, we have to be more thoughtful about establishing those rhythms and creating a routine that serves the goals we have and the children who are actually in the home at that point in time. The other thing that a routine does is it serves me and my kids. It's not something that I have to serve. And so it's a little bit of a semantic difference, but I never thought of ourselves as having a schedule, but we do have a routine. And our routine is, that we are, everyone in the house, we're not early risers. And so everyone in the house is awake by 8 o'clock, or a lot later than you would think. And then we have breakfast and Bible time. And that's the start to our day. Unless something really extraordinary is going on, we start the day in worship, singing a hymn, and then in the things that we can do together. So that would either be whatever we were currently reading for literature. It might be what we're doing for history or a science experiment or demonstration. I also didn't do all the things every day. Everybody would do some math and do some reading and do some writing every day. But then history and science and geography and some of those other things would happen maybe 2 or 3 days a week on sort of a rolling schedule. But that left us with margin. I learned early that there has to be white space. I need white space in my checkbook to account for unexpected expenses. I need white space in my calendar to account for unexpected events. And then I need white space in my day to account for the cat throwing up in the clean laundry basket. And the kid who, just went outside to play, but then decided to do a Superman off, the swing tower. And I can't look at him and say, oh, I'm so sorry. It's time for geography. I'll, take care of you after 5. But we can, with the margin in our day, we can handle those things as they come up and then get back on with the next thing. Is the next thing read aloud? Is it snack? Is it independent work time? Is it time to, tidy your room or fold your laundry? But having a routine that allowed us to move through most days in an order that we all understood. I think that has made a big difference for the kids who have come to us in foster care, particularly the older ones. They oftentimes come out of chaos. And so I have a lot of visual schedules. I have things posted in the house so that we know that here's what happens at 8 a.m. and 9:30, and we have lunch at 11:30, and so on, until bedtime or through the evening activities, which can vary according to, whatever, trail life or martial arts or, music lessons, whatever's going on. But that's how I did it. I did it by being thoughtful about our routine, holding it, but loosely, and having something to go back to when the unexpected happened. Also, always prioritizing people over paperwork. I'm never going to push somebody through a math lesson at the kitchen table who is dissolving into tears. We're going to close the book and tend to the heart. We're going to close the book and tend to the relationships. When we have tempers that flare up between siblings, then I don't have anything more important to do in that moment than to shepherd them into right relationship with each other. The books will still be there. And so having a right priority, the people always come first, but then also expecting diligent work. I want you to bring to me as your finished product, your math lesson, your paragraph, your, geography map. I want it to represent the best that you have to offer. So I would ask them, would you give this to Jesus? If you wouldn't give it to Jesus, then it's not ready for you to give it to me. And so while we do tend hearts and we do prioritize relationships, we also know how important it is to love the Lord with our mind and to be excellent in our pursuit of academics, of understanding his world, whether that is understanding his world through mathematics and arithmetic, through understanding science, through our botany lessons, through our Bible lessons, through our history. Where are we in the world? Where did we come from? And where are we going? And how are we going to get there? All of those subjects exist to cultivate in us a deep worship for, love of, and service to the Lord. And so yes, we work hard to be excellent. Yes, we persevere when it's difficult. Yes, we make a point of memorizing things that are life-giving, but all in the context of worshiping the Creator and not the creation, and certainly not some curriculum or textbook or test score.
That's so good. I operate on the same philosophy in our homeschool that, I say often to be a family and not a school. And by that, I just mean don't try to be a public school, but integrate your educational hours into your family life and make family the most important thing and fit your schoolwork into that. And a lot of people misunderstand and say, oh, you got to educate them too. Absolutely. Education is very important, but people are important. They're the most important. Well, Dana, this has been such an encouraging conversation. I think not just to the parents with special needs children, but really all parents. You've shared so many great nuggets of wisdom for everyone homeschooling, and I really appreciate that. So I know that you're not a blogger or an influencer, but if someone had some questions, where could they reach you? Would email be the best way?
Email's the best way, and you're welcome to share my email address. It's just Dana, DANA.Wilson, WILSON, at mac.com. I also serve on the board of our state's homeschool organization, Homeschool Oklahoma, so you can reach us at www.homeschooloklahoma.org. Any questions that you have for the organization or for me personally can come to us at team, TEAM, at hsok.org. Those also come to me. And so we love answering questions and encouraging families in the state of Oklahoma who have decided to bring or keep their children home for school.
That's great. And that's actually a pretty handy website. I've Googled things before and wound up on the Homeschool Oklahoma website with the answer. So it's a good site.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for joining us. And I'm going to share a lot of links to the things that you talked about in the description so people can easily go find some of the books you mentioned and, of course, your email address. But thank you for sharing your wisdom. I think a lot of people are going to be blessed by that. Thank you for listening to my podcast today. If you want more content like this, you can go to my website at nickitruesdell.com. That's NICKITRUESDELL.com, and find me on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
You're listening to the Biblical Family Network.